Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and this video is not to bash Imbibitor Lunae, so don't get all excited with all the comments that you want to put on. I'm not saying he's bad. In fact, I think he's a very strong DPS, definitely best in class in the game for especially imaginary damage dealer. There are some pros and cons to this specific character, but we've already talked about it individually, like looking very zoomed in onto magnifying into his kit in the honest review video that we just put out on the channel. You can check it out if you're interested. In this video specifically, I want to talk about something more broad and longer term, because a lot of us don't just play the game for one patch. We want to play for multiple patches and thereafter. And I want to talk about the big picture here, what I'm seeing at a much more macro level rather than looking at individual characters specifically. Of course, I almost considered skipping this character for various reasons, some of them a little bit more personal, but most of it is also from a tactical point of view. I didn't skip him in the end. I have him at E0, and I didn't pull Brighter Than the Sun, his signature light cone. For those of you longer term followers on the channel, you know that any character I don't really fancy too much, I tend not to pull their signature light cone, or if they are maybe more supportive in nature as well. So that's like a pretty good benchmark to see whether I like a particular character or not, if you're a longer term viewer as well. What am I running on Imbibitor Lunae, you might ask? I'm running a 60 to 180. I usually will play, for example, the Blade Signature Light Cone, because I have this, which gives me a nice amount of crit rate just for the stats as well. So it's a 60, 180. Wouldn't say it's like the top tier best. I'm running 4-piece Banditry Desert at E0, and my tracers are more or less okay. I also have his best in slot supports. I have Pella build, I have Bronya build, I have Yukong at E6, which we are more or less pretty much good to go for his build. Yet, even with all the ideal setup, I was also considering skipping this character. And the first thing, of course, I want to say is like the personal aspect to it. Maybe is I just don't really like hyper carries in nature. What do I mean by hyper carry? Hyper carries are any character, for example, like Jingyuan. You have characters like Imbibitor Lunae. These characters benefit, especially if you invest like a lot of resources into these particular units. He is definitely a strong version, a very strong hyper carry. I'm not doubting his abilities. I think he can probably carry most accounts in the game very well. And if you are a new player, a free-to-play player, I'm not dissuading you. I'm just saying for my case, I have almost every single character in the game playing since launch as well, with many well-invested units already. For my case, when I have many choices, I actually don't want to run hyper carries. I would rather much split up my DPSs into like where the damage comes across the board rather than like focusing on a single character. So that's like my perspective, my own personal take to it. So our game states are definitely different. You might have different characters, you might not have all these characters, but if you do, you have like almost every single character in the game, you probably understand what I'm feeling. And as the game goes by, like 6 months in, 1 month in, or 1 year in, a lot of us will have a lot more characters in the game, and you will start to make sense like what I'm saying right now in September 2023. Once we have more characters, you will get what I'm saying, that hyper carry is not that attractive as the game goes by. It's also kind of boring if you are just like putting all your best characters into just one unit. That is my own personal account bias related. Another thing for that is, as mentioned in like the specific video, I think that hyper carry as a game state is coming to an end. A lot of more teams that are going to come up and rising will definitely require more than one unit. And it makes sense because you don't just want to sell one character in the game. You want to sell many characters to players. From a business standpoint, why would you just want to sell like one hyper carry for each element when you can milk your audience entirely by introducing a character, for example, like Kafka, who requires you to build across the board like DOT characters, so you really do a lot more damage and you require a lot more resources investment. If the game was so simple, like just building Bronya, building Tingyun, building one hyper carry and like one sustain unit, and we clear the game, they wouldn't really make much money, don't you think? Like it will just end at this point of time, and then there will be a negative revenue or then negative profit for the entirety of the remainder of the lifespan. It makes no sense. And that is one of the reasons why I don't really like hyper carries in general. It just conflicts or is very conflicting to the whole idea of how gacha games survives. They will just keep selling you hyper carries, and you will just be forced to like get into this slippery slope or this trap of just keep wanting to pull like, I want this best hyper carry, I want the best wind DPS, I just want the best lightning DPS, and so on and so forth. You just be trapped in that loop. And that is, I think, the second reason why I actually wasn't too impressed about this particular character, and I was also, of course, considering skipping him. Now, that aside, I think something even more personal, of course, for those of you who followed the channel, you knew that I was taking a break. I was going on vacation as well to Japan. I'll probably talk about it in a little bit as well for those of you who are interested in what I did there and what are the nice things to see. But basically, as a content creator, it costs us a lot of money to actually like keep pulling for these characters. And definitely, Heng, Imbibitor, Lunae, I would have to fork it out of my own personal savings because I wouldn't be making a lot of videos when he was first released, and I didn't manage to make it because I was of course traveling. I didn't have access to all my gear. But that aside, I still decided to pull him in the end because I think it's a creator's responsibility to have the character in the game so that you can do proper analysis. I think it's a big fluff if you don't have characters and you talk that this character is better than this character based on theory. I think it's a huge fluff. You need to actually have the amount of characters in the game so you can actually put your so-called money where your mouth is. And I think that is something that I hold myself to high standards. I want to have every single character, so I'll pay for it. Even though that is definitely, I'm not going to be making much content on this character. As you can see on the channel, I just did like a team comp guide, which I always do, and just one simple build guide. Nothing else, which I always do like a bit more for other characters. And I don't think it's bad, that's why I didn't do more content. It's just I wasn't around when he was first released. I might do as and when as it goes along, as I find some things that are interesting, but tons of other content creators have created great content already. Very, very well done by the rest of the content creators in the community. I just don't feel like playing catch up to already very well done content. If I find anything useful and new, I will definitely add on to to value add to the community as well. So that's like my three personal reasons why I was thinking of skipping Imbibitor Lunae. Now that is for like the current and like the game state in terms of that and my personal account bias. I want to talk about the future now, and I think a lot of people are forgetting that there are going to be other DPS characters coming out. And one thing to be really honest, the supports in this game, let me just go through this list. Like Luota, you have Fire MC, you have Silver Wolf Bailu, Japat, you have to some extent Welt, Bronya, Mark 7. All these characters, I'm just talking about random ones based on like the order that I'm seeing the characters here. These units actually survive a lot better if you realize that you think back from version 1.0 all the way to now. These characters actually didn't change too much in value. Maybe the only one out of this that got slightly worse is Welt, because he was used as a DPS at 1.0. Now he's not really used as a DPS anymore because you have better DPSs and Imbibitor Lunae out. But other than that, their supportive abilities are more or less still very, very strong. Especially if you are, for example, Bailu, you don't have Luota. Likely still very, very strong for a lot of characters. Whereas if you're playing that game that Hoyoverse wants you to play, chasing the flashiest DPS available, you will find yourself conflicted and maybe to some extent a little bit upset also. Because you're chasing the best DPS, the best DPS, the best DPS here, the best DPS. It never ends. And we're going to have Jingliu, we're going to have Topaz and Nambi coming up, which offer maybe different playstyles, different elements as well. But ultimately, we are all going to be chasing for one big PP number, which I don't think is very healthy in especially a turn-based games. I've been playing competitively, especially in mobile games when I was younger. I played competitive TCG as well. And from what I realized, hyper carries don't tend to last a really long time. And damage dealers at the end of the day has a very, very quick meta shift in across a lot of different genres of games. The one that lasts and the ones that are much valuable across the longer period of times is flexibility. Characters that can fit into multiple situations won't really get useless, and characters that even though they are hyper carry, could be hyper carry in nature, but can also play out of it as well. And of course your support characters definitely do much better across a longer period of time. And mind you not that we don't forget this fact, gacha games isn't a game that you are trying to defeat the enemy, it's actually a resource allocation game, because at the end of the day, what we are limited is the premium currency that we have, which gives us these new characters which we use to tackle the game. Characters that give you more bang for your premium currency indirectly help you win the game because you are already winning the resource allocation game. And that's what this channel is all about, to help each and every one of us allocate our resources a little bit more efficiently. And you might think, then it's going to be so boring, I can't pull for characters I want. That's not the case, because the more you are efficient in things that don't matter, then you can be less efficient in stuff that matter, and you can actually pull characters that you want and then be efficient elsewhere, so you can make up for any of the inefficiencies that you ever want in the game. And that's what I hope that this channel does for the community, and that's my contribution as well. Anyways, I talked enough. If you guys found this video insightful, helpful, or you would like to see more of such content, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your time, and see you in the next video.